Hello, friend. Thanks for pressing play on this episode of the Brassy Broadcast. I'm Jen Edds, the head broad in charge at the Brassy Broadcasting Company. And joining me in the studio for this series on Enlightenment in the Modern World is Amy Woodall. And Amy is the executive vice president of Sandler Training Trustpointe, a performance improvement company. She and her colleagues travel the globe, helping organizations increase their effectiveness in sales, service, and leadership through addressing the head trash holding them back, key behaviors needed to achieve goals, and techniques proven to yield results. Throughout her tenure, it's become apparent that most people lack the understanding of how to effectively communicate with self. Amy began her personal meditation practice several years ago and became a believer that through meditation and mindfulness, modern enlightenment can be achieved. Amy is also a 3-time guest on the Brassy Broadcast, and you can hear previous conversations with Amy in episodes 28 and 68 about how to not throat punch your bandmates or coworkers and how to navigate the drama triangle. And I will have links to those in the show notes. Amy, welcome back to the Brassy Broadcast.
Yay. Thank you so much, Jen.
I'm so excited that we get to actually create an entire series about enlightenment in the modern world. So I think to kick this off, I need you to tell me, what does that even mean?
You know, this idea of enlightenment is that we kind of look at the world and be like, okay, I get it. Like, man, everything's interconnected and there is no separateness. And there's just this level of inner peace that happens. And I know that that's tough in the world that we live in because we're not all monks. We don't live on the mountainside. We're not walking around in our robes. But there is definitely an opportunity for us to feel just better with where we are, to feel like we have more control over our state. We have more control over our happiness. We have more control over how we show up. And we can really be content regardless of what's happening on the outside. So for me, that's my idea of enlightenment in the modern world. And I have this, I spread this message to anybody I have the opportunity to train or coach or speak in front of, which is really if we can learn how to own our stuff. I would love to put a different expletive in there, but I'll keep it PG. If we can learn how to just have extreme ownership over how we show up and how we feel and not blame that on anyone else, and we have the ability to be flexible, that in itself is a level of enlightenment. And the world needs more of that, man.
Amen to that. That is so true. What have you found through your own study and through trainings that you have done? What are some of the modern misconceptions about, I guess, what we would call enlightenment?
Yeah, and I think, so if we've put the terms like meditation and mindfulness out there, right? Because that's the practice that kind of helps achieve this different level of understanding. And there are some definite misconceptions. So the first one I think that's really common when I've gone in and done some mindfulness and meditation workshops with organizations, when I say, hey, when you think about mindfulness or meditation, what comes to mind? And inevitably, there's always somebody who like puts their hands in the air and they go, Om. We think that like meditation is about, like this ethereal and sort of like relaxed, wearing crystals in your underwear kind of thing. And it's really not it. So the misconception.
You're so not that girl.
I am so not that girl. Listen, I shave my armpits semi-regularly and, I don't hug trees or eat granola, which if that's your thing, I'm not judging you, but that's not sort of like the need in order to fit into this meditation or mindfulness space. Mm-hmm. You can be a totally normal, like a beer drinking, pizza loving human being and still have the ability to meditate. So there's no sort of like preconceived, you have to fit into this box. Yeah. So the idea that meditation is spiritual only, I think is a big myth. Mm-hmm. Because meditation is used for performance enhancement, which I realize sounds like a little blue pill. But like if you want to get better at anything, meditation and mindfulness is a great practice to put into place to decrease your stress, to, increase happiness. There's just all of these beautiful things that come from it. And if you want to take it to a spiritual place, there's the opportunity to do that, but it's not necessarily the foundation of the practice.
So what is the difference between mindfulness and meditation?
mindfulness, I feel like people are more willing, I think, to embrace mindfulness because it doesn't come with as many myths or misconceptions that meditation does, but it actually has different effects on the brain. So you can be mindful with your eyes wide open, and it's just sort of being in the moment, paying attention to what's happening. For some people, they might get into a mindful state if they're highly focused and really flowing with completing a project, or maybe they're running. People will say, oh, well, my meditation is in running. Well, no, that's really more in a mindful flow state rather than meditation. It's just a different way of accessing the brain. Meditation is a deep state of rest for the brain, and it actually activates different levels. If we're looking at the various hemispheres of the brain, when you're in a deep meditation, it's deeper than a deep sleep, and as far as being restorative for the brain. So being in meditation actually has far better payoff. I think mindfulness is a great practice, just sort of like, okay, I'm going into this meeting, I'm going to be mindful so that I can be a better listener and I can ask better questions. So it's more, for me, the way I interpret it is it's more of what we're doing in the waking state, where meditation is sort of this deep rest that we put our body through.
Gotcha. That totally makes sense. I know one of the misconceptions we talked about even before we turned on the microphones was this idea that you have to clear your mind to be meditating. How is that so not the case?
Yeah, I think there's, some folks have said, I've tried meditation before and I wasn't very good at it, or it didn't really work for me, or there's this idea, and I've heard it from several people because I have decided to come out of the meditation closet and let people know that I'm a meditator, and just so I can watch the looks on their faces to be like, oh, okay. And for some people, you can tell they get visibly uncomfortable because of the myths that come along with it, right?
Exactly.
But if people have said, I tried it once or twice and I just wasn't any good at it, like I couldn't quiet my mind. And I'm like, yes, that's the point. I mean, so what the misconception is that in meditation, your brain is quiet, it's turned off, and you're just in this, relaxed, peaceful, no thought state. That it could not be further from the truth.
That's never happened for me.
It has never happened for me either. And maybe it will happen in like 30-second spurts. But, if your brain is shut off completely, then you're basically dead and there's a problem there. And thoughts are involuntary. I mean, they're going to come in. The purpose of meditation is how often we can catch ourselves and then come back to focus. Catch yourself and come back to focus. And that's a part of exercising the brain. It's kind of like taking the brain to the gym, essentially.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so we're strengthening our capacity to focus for longer amounts of time and to be present for longer amounts of time, so that we're more likely to be in a mindful state when we're woke, if you will. When we're in a waking state. So we meditate so that we can just become more efficient, effective, happier in life, not so that we can be this amazing, great meditator who has these great meditation experiences. Because I can tell you, I meditate twice a day, and there's some where they're not necessarily these great peaceful meditations. It's very disruptive. My brain is in a million different places, but it's still just the repeated practice that makes you more effective and efficient, once you're out of that meditation state.
How do you bring yourself back into it to refocus? Because I have to count. Like I just do counts of 4.
Yes.
And breathe in and breathe out. And that will sometimes bring me back into it. What do you have, a mantra, or what do you do?
So for folks who are listening who are not familiar, have never done meditation before, one of the great way to practice any of this is just Google, and you can find a million meditations on YouTube. I initially had purchased an app many years ago called Breathe. It used to be called something else. I think it was OMG, I Can Meditate. And now it's Breathe, BREETH, and there might be an E at the end of that, where that is guided meditation. And so it's a little more of the mindfulness practice, if you will. But you could Google anything. You could Google, meditation for stress reduction, and you'll find something. And as they're guiding you through, what they'll do is remind you, like, come back to your breath or come back to the mantra, whatever it is that your focus is on. And so just be following through and know that your brain's going to go on this crazy, thought exploration, and you've just got to keep coming back. If you're doing this on your own, if maybe you're a little more practiced and you have your own sort of meditation techniques that you utilize. It's really just sort of checking back in. It's a great practice to figure out how do we just become aware of the thoughts themselves, because when we're involved in the thought, we don't see it happening.
Oh, right.
Right? We're along for the ride, essentially. But when we can learn how to take a step back and be the observer of the thought, that's when we catch it faster.
Yeah.
And then we can say, okay, back to breathing. So lots of different techniques, but it's just the repeated practice. Catch it, come back, catch it, come back.
Yeah, to pull yourself back is, I think we're all still working on that. Probably anybody that does this and tries to practice with any practice, any consistency at all. Another myth that we talked about, or I don't feel like this is necessarily a myth, but I think it's it's more of an excuse than a myth, is I don't have time to meditate.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
I used to be one of those people who thought that too, right? Because and if we all look at our life, like we're all super busy and we could all get into like a match of who's the busiest, right? We love to sort of use that as a way to sort of validate all of our behavior.
Truly.
Like, I'm so busy. And so I could be like, hey, dude, guess what? I drive 115 miles a day. I have kids in every sports known to man. I have gym time. I travel for work. And so there's all the reasons not to. But I will tell you from experience that meditation actually buys you time back.
How?
Good question. So for me, I take 20 minutes every morning, 20 minutes every afternoon. So that's a total of 40 minutes, which is not, it's a lot of time, essentially.
Yeah.
But because I take that time, I am more efficient in my day. Where before my own tendencies, and we all have to know our own tendencies, right? My own tendencies might be to have squirrel syndrome and try and start about 5 projects at once before I complete one. And when I meditate regularly, I'm more focused, so I can get one thing to completion at a faster amount of time and with less sort of pinging, if you will, of the brain and the thoughts. And so therefore, I'm not wasting as much time. The other thing that happens is like emotional waste takes up so much of our time. Emotional waste, and I actually learned this term from an author, her name's Cy Wakeman, C-Y is how she spells her name, Cy Wakeman. She wrote a book called Reality-Based Leadership, and also another one called No Ego, which I love both of them, great reads. And she says that the average human spends, I can't remember how many hours a day, but it's several hours a day focused on emotional waste. And we bring that into the workplace. And now leaders are dealing with emotional waste. And so I think if there's any leaders or owners of companies that happen to be listening to this, teaching meditation and mindfulness within the workplace can actually decrease the time that we're spending on emotional waste, because there's this different level of awareness on our triggers, our emotions, our thoughts. There's less finger pointing and blame. We do become better communicators with self, and therefore we can become better communicators with other people. So I feel like the excuse of no time is BS. It's really, you can't afford not to.
I agree. I have found that just from a focus standpoint alone, because there are mornings that I get up and I'm like, oh, I've got deadlines. I've got to get all these projects done. If I don't just take that 10 minutes to sit and try to quiet my brain and get some focus. And I also feel like there's an ownership in taking that time, whether it's 10 minutes or 20 minutes, to say, I'm owning my day. I'm the boss of my day. I'm in charge of this, and this is how I want it to start. It's not all of these outside, yes, we have clients, and that's great, and all of these people that have expectations and needs from us, but they cannot be driving my day. I have to take that ownership at some point.
Yeah. I tell this to clients constantly, which is all of us are well-intentioned, but we can be poorly behaved. So if we're more intentional from the beginning and the get-go, and I think mindfulness and meditation gives us a chance to do that, to really be very intentional, then we're more likely to have good behavior follow. But if we're not doing that, then our day runs us. And what ends up happening is we can allow stress and sort of the thoughts to take over, and we can show up and not really be the best version of ourselves. And then we're left to defend the good intentions that we didn't consider before.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, I could be on my soapbox all day long about this, but I feel like it just really puts us at it kind of level sets our day.
Truly. Yes.
It's a good level set. So just to go back, it's kind of like, yeah, we can't afford not to from a time perspective, but also an emotional well-being perspective, because how many of us don't want to just feel better?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I don't know anybody who's like, no, I really enjoy feeling like crap most of the time. Nah, kind of addicted to that. This is a tool to just feel better.
And we are going to be exploring a lot of tools throughout this series. And some upcoming episodes are going to include exercising the ego, power up performance, shutting down stress, harnessing our happiness, course correcting crappy communication, which I'm super stoked about, and expanding our energy. So to wrap this up, is there one technique or takeaway that you think people need to be mindful of to start practicing?
Yeah. So in every one of these episodes, we will talk about a technique that can be practiced, that I'm learning through. I'm going through a certification myself. You don't have to be certified to do meditation. You don't have to be certified to teach meditation, but it's giving me some really good background on how neuroscience and sort of meditation's been around for thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years. And how do we bring all of this together? So for this one, I would say for our kickoff episode, the challenge that I would give the listeners is just Google a meditation and start. Just even if it's a 5-minute mindfulness practice, 5-minute stress relief, 5 minutes of how to sleep better, Google it and just give some level of experience to it and just see what your starting place is. What's the judgments that come up? What's your thoughts? What's your fears? And then make sure you dive into the other episodes and kind of practice some of the techniques that we'll bring to life.
I love it. And we do want to hear from you and continue this discussion. Let us know what in this episode resonated with you or sparked an epiphany. And you can connect with us both on LinkedIn, Amy at Amy Woodall and me at Jen Edds, EDDS. And just message us that you listened or share the episode and tag us. But more importantly, if you know someone that's going to benefit from hearing this series, share it with them. You can share links straight from Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcasting app of choice. Thanks for listening. Now get out in the world and do some good.